YouTube, welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I'm Jackie and it's a new year. And I'm starting out the new year with talking about my favorite books for the second half of the year. I already did my first half of the year, so you can watch that video and then watch this one right after. Okay, so first we're going to talk about one that, most of these books I don't have a physical copy of, and so I'm just going to talk about them instead of like showing you a copy of the book. And so the first one is one that I didn't start this year, but I finished it this year. And that is Michael McDowell's Blackwater, and this is a horror book, kind of a monster horror book. But the funny thing is, the horror element isn't as big in the story. Like, it's in there. It's the shadow looming in the background. But this is more of a family drama. This is about this family that lives in a small town in Alabama that has a very close-knit community. It's a matriarchal society. Like, the women run the roost, run the household, make decisions, and it's so good. And even though the horror element isn't super strong and you almost forget about the horror element until it happens, it like really surprises you when it happens, because you're like, oh wait, oh my god, there's this horror element going on. There's a monster looming in the swamps of Blackwater. But it's just so good. You really get to know this family. Like, I think if you are a Stephen King fan and like how he really dives deep as you get to know his characters, I think you will like this book. Which, it is a big book. It is, I think originally I heard that it was published as 6 novellas originally, and then he put it into one big book. So it's long. It is definitely a tome, but it is just so good but like Stephen King, you just really get to know these characters and you come to love them and appreciate them. I mean, some of them you hate or get annoyed with. At least I did. And there were some of them just drove me nuts and frustrated me, no end, with the stupid mistakes they made in their behavior and their attitudes. Like some of the younger generations, but not just the younger generations, the older, like the family matriarch drove me nuts with her need to control the family and just control everybody's actions, and how her son Oscar just could not, like, he was under the thumb of his mother for the longest time until this woman comes into his life, and all of a sudden it's a battle of wills between this mysterious woman who showed up. I cannot remember the name. I mean, she's a pretty significant character, but her name escapes me. Eleanor's the name. Eleanor shows up in the middle of nowhere. I mean, out of nowhere, after this, this mysterious flood, Oscar finds her, and he falls in love, and they get married. So it's very much the Eleanor and Mary Love, the mother, the family matriarch, trying to control him, and he's just so submissive. So he also drove me crazy too. But a lot of the men in this family are like that. So yes, it drove me nuts, but at the same time, it wasn't a surprise. As the story progressed, I realized that all the men in this family are very passive and very submissive to the women. Because, like I said, this is a very matriarchal society, and there's a creepy factor to the story. Even though the horror element isn't a big thing in the story, there's still an unsettling aspect to it. There's a creepiness. There's a little bit of sense of anticipation and wondering what's gonna happen with these characters, and are we gonna have a run-in with the monster at some point, and anticipating, and not just that, but also horrors of the outside world. There's encounters with that, and there's this, like I said, this element of this family and their strong bond, and each of the characters and what's great is that, yeah, there's a lot of characters, but they're each individuals. They have their own selfish needs and desires, and also I am fascinated by small town stories where these people, like, just even the ones that want to leave don't leave. They're like, this is a security. This is almost a security blanket staying in this town. And just this whole community is so fascinating to read about, this whole world. And I definitely want to know more about the community itself and the residents of this community. But we spent most of our time with, of course, this family, and you know, and like I said, maybe hardcore horror fans might not love it. They might or they might not. I mean, although, like, this is a favorite of Mike from Mike's Book Reviews, and he's a horror reader fan. But I think he just likes a good story too, and but yeah, this it is also a very slow moving story. Like I said, it was 6 novellas, and then he put into one big book. So it is very slow moving, but it's so good and so worth the read. And then then I want to talk about one I read more recently, towards the end of the year, and that is Catherine of Aragon, One True Queen, the one True Queen by Alison Weir. This is Alison Weir's take on the 6 Tudor queens. You had Philippa Gregory's. That is the most known, most popular, particularly because of the other Boleyn Girl becoming a big movie. And even though I said I wasn't interested in Philippa Gregory, I started buying her books. But I'm not gonna read her Tudor series yet. I'm gonna focus on her Plantagenet series. But anyway, so this was, again, such an interesting book. It is there's a bittersweetness. There's a melancholy to this book because, of course, if you know your history, you know what's going to happen to Catherine of Aragon. I keep wanting to say Aragorn, but it's Aragon. It is so sad, but also you just keep hoping that things are going to turn out okay for her, even though they're not. And this is not, and this isn't even just, I read the book, so I know what's going to happen. It's more like it's history. It's history fiction. So it's fictional, but it's based on fact. So it's, like I said, you know what's going to happen to her character. You also gotta admire her because she is so pious and feels so strongly in her faith and her belief system, and she's so kind to people, and she's a sweetheart. And I mean, sometimes she can be a little rigid with her belief system, but not in a mean, cruel way, just in a very naive way, and very much, and you almost get frustrated with her because you're like, how can you not see, or how can you not understand? Because her naivety gets exposed when there are people who come into her life that are spying on her, and she doesn't know, she's surrounded by people she can't 100% trust and could potentially turn on her. And I also felt frustrated for her because King Henry VII was not giving her straight answers. And neither was her. She was just being used by both her own father and Henry VIII's father. And you just felt so bad for her because no one was telling her, no one was explaining her, and she was so afraid of getting sent back to Spain. And you just wanted to give her a hug and assure her that everything would be okay, and be like, oh, I know the future. I know you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be safe. You're not gonna have to go back to Spain. I wish I could reassure her, but then I'd probably be just accused of being a witch if I told her that I know the future. And I just felt so bad because she was an outsider in England. But then, when her and Henry VIII finally get married and are together, they were so happy for a good long, I think, 10 years before Anne Boleyn showed up. And Henry VIII revealed his true colors as a greedy asshole. Because he was so endearing as a little boy, but then, even as a young man, but then as he gets older, he becomes an asshole. Now, it's partly to do with there was an accident that happened to him where he hurt himself, so he injured and almost died. And, I think he fell off his horse during a tournament. And he also got an ulcer on his leg, which is disgusting. And you felt so bad because they seem to have such a beautiful love story in the beginning. You kind of forgot, you forget that historically it's going to go sour and things are going to fall apart. But it was such a good story. You just really felt for this young woman and wanted her to be happy. And I just wanted to know how things were going to work out, how things were going to happen for her. And is it going to be revealed that this person is a spy or not? Who could she? Is there anyone she could trust? And just like what, and also to see what she would do as a queen, see the things that she did, because I don't know all the details about Catherine of Aragon. I've never read a nonfiction about her. I've only read fiction, so I definitely will look into her and find out more about her. And there is an author's note, so Alison Weir does explain how she did take some liberties and change some things, I think that's how it is with historical fiction. Like, people criticize it, but it's like, with historical fiction, you almost kind of need to do that, because sometimes history can be just as entertaining as fiction is, but sometimes you need to tweak things a little bit in history to make it just slowly you make people aware that you're changing things. But yeah, anyway, Alison Weir's first book in the Tudor series was so good and so page turning. I definitely it's not fast paced, it is a slow story, but it's slow paced, but it's still, I definitely wanted to, see what was going to happen each time in her life, the steps she would take, how long she and King Henry would be happy before things went sour. Okay, and then we have, this is one I read in, I don't know, I think it was September when I read this, either August or September. The Ballad of Perilous Graves by Alex Jennings. This was really fun. I did a separate review for this one, so I'm not going to say too much, but this was so much fun, and it talked about New Orleans and showed a new kind of New Orleans, but still paid homage to the original. And there are references to, I think was it a hurricane that destroyed the Sally? I think Hurricane Katrina, I think it was, that destroyed. It references that plays a role in the story. It's about the love of music and art. And it is a young adult story. I haven't read a young adult in a long time. And I appreciate that the parents weren't dismissive of the kids, weren't just like, oh, you're just kids, and oh, it's just your imagination. They were protective. Maybe, they were protective and they didn't want their kids to go on this journey, on this quest, but at the same time, they knew they had to, so they were very supportive parents. I really liked seeing, it kind of was a nice change of pace to see a story with supportive parents that weren't just saying, you need help, you're delusional, or just your imagination, And it was, like I said, pay homage to the culture of New Orleans, and it was just so much fun, so good. And please look at my review for this if you haven't already, and please check out this book. So then there is Babel. I am one of the people who actually enjoy Babel. I know not everybody loved Babel, but I thought this was really good. And this R.F. Kuang book is about this young man who, he is from Canton, China. He was found when he was little, but he had been, when he was like, I think 6. Okay, let me start over. So, this book starts in Canton, China, and you have a main character, this Chinese boy who his whole family got killed by cholera, so it's just him. And he is found by this English professor who comes to offer, he asks him some questions, talks to him, and this kid already can speak English, so he knows. He had a tutor who educated him on England and America, his knowledge outside of China, so he is already start on the path of being very educated. And this professor shows up, and turns out he was the one who made sure that this boy had the proper English education. And he was preparing to come claim, and he comes to claim him and tells him that he is responsible for his education, making sure he had a tutor and everything, and that he wants to take him with him because this boy has nothing left here in China, and give him more of an education. And eventually, when he is old enough, when he is a young adult, to send him to the infamous college, send him to the infamous College of Oxford, particularly Babel, the school of translation, Babel. And so, of course, this kid, he goes with him. He even changes his name, and ends up being part of this translation school. And it goes really well at first. He makes friends, but then he realizes the true intentions of this school, that this Britain wants to become an empire and control all the countries, and they use these kids that are from all these different countries to help them, to allow them access to a world to become an empire. Because in this world, people use the magic system of this world is where you can transcribe words from your own language and the English language onto these silver bars, and these bars will cause them to do things, or like whatever the word is supposed to be. And so, if they have control of these silver bars, then they control the world. So it's a book about translation and colonization, how, and the horrors of that and the consequences of it. And even the act of changing his name to a more American, not English name, is erasing this young man's culture. And, it's the struggle that a lot of people have, where they've been Americanized or Englishized, but they come from these other countries who have been taken over by the English, colonized by England or Spain, even, and is, in the struggle of being that person who enjoys the privileges, but then realizes that, oh, my own country is suffering and being controlled by this English-speaking world. And what that means for you, what the kind of difficult position you are put in, and what do you do about it? How do you respond to it? Do you fight back, or do you just sit there and let it happen? And how different people react to it. And it's a heartbreaking read, but it has that academic element that is actually fun in the beginning, until you realize, along with Robin, you realize what's really going on with Babel. I mean, you kind of know, but it really coming to the forefront of your mind, along with, even though you know what's going to happen, just it revealing itself to you slowly, or the understanding reminding you that, oh, wait, this is about colonization. And I love the bonds of friendship, the complicated friendship between these kids, Robin and his new group of friends, and how that looks at different people's perspectives. Like, you have this one girl who's, she's a girl and she wasn't expected to go to this school, unlike her brother was, but her brother screwed up and then got himself killed. So she goes to the school. And then you have these 3 kids from different countries. And all four of these young people have very different perspectives, and they cannot see past each other. They can't empathize with each other. They can't, or at least the 3 of them from the different countries can't empathize with this girl that's, was desperate to get in there, improve herself, and she can't empathize with these kids whose country was brutalized and now being controlled. Well, she's a woman that had no good, they didn't believe in her, but yet she still has that privilege. So it discusses that as well. It's a deep dive on that dynamic as well. And it's such a interesting read. It is a little slow at times, but like I said, it's It was really fun reading, getting the academic stuff in the beginning, but then in the background is these complicated, messy, dark, these complicated relationships and these dark themes of colonization and how that affects your relationship with people. And it was so good. And I know a lot of people say she's very hand-fisted with those kinds of themes, and she's very in your face, but I was fine with it. I very much enjoyed it. But yeah, there are some people who say it is very much, very like in your face, and very forceful with her themes and her beliefs and everything. What the point she's trying to get across. Just so if you want to get a fair, a balanced assessment, and not just, I mean, of course, I want you guys to pay attention to what I gotta say about it, but also look at what other people have to say about it. And then we have The Trouble with Miss Montgomery Hearst by our very own Katie. I can't believe I can't think of her. Katie. Oh my god, I'm drawing a blank here what her last name is. Katie from Books and Things. I cannot. Lumsden. Katie Lumsden from our very own Books and Things BookTube channel. This is her sophomore novel, and this was so much fun and so good. Like, I think if you like Trollope and Austen, I think you would really like this one. This is about this small English village, and one of the most local bachelors that that is on the market, that as far as everyone in the community was concerned, they thought he was on the market. It turns out that he has a fiance in London, I think, and he's going to go marry her and bring her to their community. And so rumors swirl, everyone goes crazy about this whole thing because this one is an outsider, so everyone wants to know about this woman and what her deal is. And they find out that she's a widower and she already has 3 kids, so it's this big deal. But who she is, and oh my god, why is he marrying why is he marrying someone who has kids that's already been married when he can marry one of the beautiful young bachelorettes of the community? And so that's the main thing of the story, is this community obsessing over Mr. Montgomery Hearst and his new wife. And when they show up, everyone just wants to get their hands on her and get a piece of her and wanted, nose in their business and everything. This couple just wants to live peacefully, but everyone's pressuring them to be more social, to throw a party, and they just want to know everything about them. Meanwhile, you have these subplots of one of the young bachelorettes that was expected to marry Mr. Montgomery Hearst. She was this young woman that see, even now, in ones that I read more recently, I don't always remember details like names and stuff. She is the local brewer's daughter, but it turns out she does not like men. She is gay and is in love with her best friend, who is the merchant's daughter. But they of course cannot reveal anything to anyone. They have to keep their love, their relationship, their romance a secret. They could never get married. And their story is so heartbreaking, but there are these beautiful, very sweet, charming moments. It really explores their different class status. Even, there's a lot of, and then, well, there's also her brother who is in love with this other woman, her brother is friends with the brewer's son, but he thinks he's above it. He's above the brewer's son, but he thinks, oh, I'm helping this young man out by being his friend. And there's also a young woman she's from a really rich family, and she's ready for marriage. She's being pressured to marry someone by both her parents, but then she might be in love with her piano instructor. And so all these stories kind of talk about class system and how we judge people by their class status and by how they dress. And so there's a lot of themes of there's themes of that. There's also themes of love and how sometimes people fall in love with someone that doesn't fit the standard of society, and how heartbreaking and what a struggle that is to fulfill people's expectations. And like I said, I think if you in the bubble, being in the bubble of a small town, a small community, and how that insulates you and makes you kind of prejudiced in a way and only focus on your community. You only see what your community believes in. You only see how your class thinks and feels, and it limits your perspective. So it explores that as well, and it's actually also a very cozy, very heartwarming story with these heavy themes. And like I said, if you're a fan of Austen and Trollope, I think you would really like Katie's works. At least what she has so far. She only had 2 books. So I should say, for now, I think you would like this one if you like Trollope and Austen. Her first book, The Secrets of Heartwood Hall, feels more like Bronte inspired, and I think she said that's what she intended for that one. But it also feels like it also reminds you a little bit of it might be because at the time when I read it, it wasn't that long ago that I read what is that? That horror story about the kids and the house, and I don't remember, but I'm trying to think. But well, anyway, it will pop in my head, and I'll come back to it. So that was The Trouble with Miss Montgomery Hurst by Katie Lumsden. And unfortunately, again, I'm going to remind you guys again. I mean, I talked about last time. I mentioned this last time I talked about this book. I'm going to say it again since I brought this book, since I'm talking about this book as a favorite. It doesn't have American publisher, so if you are an American subscriber, you probably either you get this book off of Amazon, but I know people take issue with Amazon and don't want to use them. So Katie also implied that you can also get the book off of Blackwell's website, which is, I think they're an English bookstore or something that I don't know a lot about it, and they will ship to the US, I think. So if you don't want to use Amazon, Blackwell's, if you're interested in this book after I've talked about it. Okay, and then The Star and Its Strange Moon by Constance Sayers is the author of A Witch in Time. But this one it has 2 timelines. It deals with old Hollywood. So the first timeline is about this young star in the 60s. In the 60s, she did a lot of beach movies. And again, her name escapes me, but she wanted to get into more serious, more dramatic roles because her career was not going too well. It's kind of tanking. And so, with help from her agent, she got in this famous horror vampire-based movie set in France by this famous French director. But then she ends up disappearing during one of the days on set. And so the movie took on a life, and somehow people got access to what was made of the movie, and it developed a cult following. And every 10 years there will be a showing of the movie. People will sell tickets, and it is this big thing. And so our present day main character is this young boy, Christopher, and what's funny, I remember his name, but I don't remember her name. He's in the modern times, and so you find out when he was a kid, he and his mom was in a band, she was a singer, and during one of the hotels they stay at, she ran across this actress's picture and had a very visceral reaction to it, and then on that same night, she died. Like, I don't remember if she committed suicide or not, but she had died, and he ends up being found by an aunt and uncle he barely knows, that his mom's sister. They raise him, and he becomes obsessed with this actress since then, and is determined to find as much information about her as possible and watch her films, follow her career, and he because he thinks it might it might help give him closure to why his mom had such a reaction to this woman on the day that she died. And he becomes obsessed, particularly with the film. And turns out his girlfriend at the time helps him get a connection to the film, and he's able to go see it. And it has a different reaction to him than it does with most people. And like I said, he also becomes obsessed with the film. And this was so much fun. It has a supernatural element to the story, but it also has it's very mysterious, and it has a bit of a romantic quality to the story with this old, it looks at old Hollywood from the 60s and what that experience was like. And I read one of my favorite books from the first half of the year, Valley of the Dolls, also explores old Hollywood from the 60s and the struggle for women to stay relevant. So it explores vaguely, it doesn't, it's not the main theme of the story, but it is in there a little bit in at least half the book. And it's just, it's tragic, but it's a really beautiful story, and it's heartbreaking. It's also kind of fun to go back and forth between the two timelines, seeing Christopher's timeline and then seeing the timeline of the actress from the 60s. I wish I could remember her name. Her name is going to pop into my head like later when I'm filming, or like in the next few minutes or something. But anyway, it's so good. Just such a beautiful read. Is again another slow moving story, but still just really good. And also, what happens to the actress was really, that whole section was so interesting to me. But I also want to know how it was going to happen with Christopher, what his story is in his struggle, because his obsession kind of comes between him and his aunt, uncle, and cousins, because they don't understand it. But it has become so important to him. He has to know. He feels such a strong connection to this actress and wanting to know what happened to her. And he tries to, and weird things happen. You find out. So I think if you're someone that, is very into the whole idea of the history of films and how sometimes films can have their history can develop a bit of a reputation or a cult following and lead to mysterious happenings, and I think it explores that as well. Which also, another book I read, by Paul Tremblay, Horror Story, horror film, also kind of is meant to explore that theme. But I think this one did a little bit more than that one. I don't know if I would say, well, I should say in my opinion better, but I know other people love Horror Story. I mean, I keep wanting to say Horror Story. It's not Horror Story, it's horror film. But I should say in a different way. Like, it definitely plays a more prominent role which I also love stories where a character is trying to interpret the past and figure out what happened to someone in the past and trying to understand it. So they're slowly, you get bits and pieces of information. I think that is always fun to read about. So yes, that is the start in A Strange Moon. Oh, and there's also a supernatural. Like I said, there is a supernatural element. So there is a horror element. So there is a little bit of, it does pay homage to horror films of old, and especially monster movies. Okay, so that is the start of A Strange Moon by Constance Sayers. And then we have, okay, I think I already talked about Hood in the first half, so I'm going to just talk about the trilogy itself, because I finished the trilogy, because the second half of the year I read the books 2 and 3, I think. So, yeah, The Scarlet and Tuck. This was such a fun trilogy, a fun take on Robin. In fact, I kind of like this better than the original, at least the version I read, because I think there's another version of Robin Hood. But this one, I like how they mix the elements of Robin Hood's story, but they had it in a different setting, and it still has the same themes of justice and fighting tyranny, but you have a different king and different conflicts you're exploring. You get a different European culture, and what they have to deal with and how the Normans show up and take over and try to erase these people and try to control them and be like, hey, guess what? We're here now. You're gonna be like us. That theme is explored. That is explored a lot in this trilogy, and it does a lot of the same things. But also, you have the Welsh culture, so Welsh mythology, Welsh lore, and their beliefs and their culture, like their myths and legends are explored. We have a character that tells those myths and legends through song. And I really love that character. She was so much fun. She's the older lady that is, the mysterious lady, that old lady that, old crone that knows so much and mothers our main character in a way. They're, and each book focuses on a different character. The first character focused on the Hood Robin character, Bran, and then the next one is the Will Scarlet character, Will Scatlock, and then this one is Friar Tuck. And they're different, and because they're such different people, and it really reflects the story, how it's told. And I think that was a perfect way to do it because it allows the reader to get the different parts of the story, the whole story. And because if you just tell it from Bran's perspective, then you're limited to what he sees, and then Scarlet is, but in each of the books you get that character's perspective. If I am making sense, I don't know if I'm making sense, but and it was so much fun. And it was kind of perfect to be reading this around the time when I was reading Dan Jones' The Plantagenets, which is on this list. And so it was kind of perfect to finish that story up around right before I read that book. And it was so much. I love Friar Tuck's character. He's such a sweet character and such a good person, and just trying to do what's right. And like, I mean, I don't know if I would, it'll be interesting to have a whole story, have a story that's focused only on him, because I would like to see how, because in this book, the book from his perspective, the third book, you get to see his faith put to the test. And his faith is challenged because he wants to try to talk to these people before they go to war, and he has so much faith because the enemy is a man of God, and he's thinking, oh, we can just reason, God following to God follower, God follower, not Godfather, God follower, man of the cloth. But it doesn't work out, and you feel so bad for him. And Will Scarlet, Scarlet is a fun book because Will Scarlet's character is fun, easygoing, even though he suffers the similar hardships. He is still more positive and fun, and he gets his own romance, which I really appreciate because I was worried they would introduce a love triangle, but they didn't, thankfully. And I mean, like I said, I don't have a problem with love triangles as much as some people. I know a lot of people do. I mean, my friend Terry is hesitant to read books that include love triangles, but it's nice when it's not the main focus. It's not like it becomes a prominent thing in the story. Like it's a reprieve when it's not included in the romances. And also and some of the villains are really fun. I mean, it was such a fun trilogy. Okay, then next we have The Pillow Book, and I do not know how to say last name. This was kind of a non-fiction because it is like basically a diary of this woman, and she was a noblewoman under the Empress. And it's just her observations on the world around her and her day-to-day activities and her thoughts on people, and it was just so amusing and so relatable. You could really, I could see some of the things that she said made me laugh, and a lot of things she said made me laugh, and I was like, oh yeah, I get that. I feel the same way. And it was just really, charming to read this woman's thoughts and feelings on things. and just also the way that she described the the world around her environment. It was so poetic. I mean, I think this was written during a time when poetry and music was important, was the main art form, was really prominent art form. So it makes sense that the Pelham book is very poetic. It now I did read that it is actually very different than other diaries written of the time. I can't remember like the structure or something. I wish I could remember what it said, but I would have to go back and look. And it was actually what I read that in A History of Japan. That book that they talk, because this book would be so famous, was so famous, and it's just, but it was funny, it was charming, and it's also not a super long read because it is a diary basically, and it just, I really enjoyed reading this woman's diary, which feels weird to say because diaries are so private most of the time, but it was published and made into a Penguin classic. But still, it was so. But it was such a. I really appreciate her putting her, putting pen to paper and putting her words out there. So the last one this is where I'm going to talk about The Plantagenets by Dan Jones. This was another one that was so interesting. Like, it was really fun to read the history of the Plantagenets, and I didn't know about I only knew about the Tudors because the Tudors are very famous, especially for King Henry VIII, his getting married 6 times, and his larger than life personality. So we don't know. We only know a little bit the Plantagenets. I think the only person we know from that dynasty would be King John. He is in Richard the Lionheart. If you know anything, you are at least vaguely familiar with them. And also, I guess Richard III, because of, you know a little bit about him, but then he comes later, because he is the last of the Plantagenets before Henry VII kicked his butt. But it's very organized and very efficiently explained and easy to read. It's not too dense of a read, and it really gives you enough information. So I really loved learning about the family dynasty, and how, each of these individual kings, the way they ran the country, their reign, and it talks about what good things they did and what bad things they did, and really diving deep. Dan Jones really dives deep into each of their reputations. And of course there is focus on certain ones more than others because they're more famous than others, and a little bit more about them. And the one thing I got is that they're, like, other than the fact that they're very human, that each of them, like, they really believed in what, in their rule, and how, like, there were some of them that, did care about what the people wanted and wanted to make the people happy and had a good balance. But then some of them were like, I'm king, this is how it's gonna be, whether you're like, I don't care about the people, it's all about what I think. And, like, King John was one of those people. He was king for a little while. Like, it's funny that, like, in the Robin Hood Disney cartoon, they call him Prince John. They never call him king. They never see him as the king. But he was the king, technically. He was the king, and meanwhile his brother's off on crusades and, taking over. And his whole thing was Saladin, that whole scenario. And it was good to be reading this around the same time as I'm listening to God Medieval podcast, because I listened to the podcast that talked about that. But anyway, it was, so it's perfect I think it really helped me listening to a podcast and reading that book too, to really, combining those two to get all the information. And I will reread that book at some point. I really want to, so I can be better at annotating it and really taking notes and diving deep. But I want to figure out which one is my favorite, which of them, and I don't know yet. which is my favorite. That's why I need to reread it so I can pick a favorite, because everyone has their favorite king, and I want, that they dive deep into, really learn about. That's one of my goals I want to do. I want to pick a favorite king in that history. But anyway, it was so much fun to, really learn more about this dynasty. And I absolutely loved it. And it was also, and like I said, it was very easy reading. It was still a lot of information, but it wasn't as dense as that one book I read on the Crusades. That one was a little too much. Or the Rubicon by Tom Holland, which is funny because now I did not realize this until I started listening to it, but looked at the transcript on my iPod. But Tom Holland is one of the hosts of the podcast, The Rest is History. Him along with, I cannot remember the other guy's name. I mean, I've been listening to them a lot right now because I have so many of their episodes downloaded. So he was, so it's kind of, I almost felt a little bad that I tried his book and I didn't even finish it because it was just too much information, too overwhelming and too dense material. I mean, I appreciate reading it, but anyway. So I just thought that was kind of interesting to not realize that I was listening to his, a podcast that he was hosting. But anyway, so reading about this was a great, and I think if you want to start learning about the Plantagenets, this might be a good book to check out. I mean, I don't know if you would consider it a good starting point to read. I mean, I think it is, but I'm not an expert yet. I mean, I would like to be a master of this history, but we will see. Anyway, so those are my favorite books for the second half of 2025. Have you read any of these books? Do any of them sound intriguing to you? I hope you check them out. No pressure. Or if you do read them but don't like them, that's okay. I will like them enough for both of us. But anyway, we'd love to know if you have any favorites this year. If or even if you've only read like one or two books and you loved it or loved both of them, if you've read more than one, I would just love to hear about that one. And I was gonna film an update video, but then I just heard the sounds of my dad working on that Book Nook kit that I bought, so I better go downstairs and help him with that. But anyway, I will do an update video possibly on the 4th because I have a day off, or possibly tonight. I don't know. We will see. But I will talk to you guys later. I hope you are enjoying your reading, and goodbye.